Hey there, get comfortable. Tonight's story isn't a fairy tale, it's a true one. And like all the best true stories, it starts not with a monster or a ghost, but with a group of friends. Imagine it's 1959. The place, Sverdlovsk, a big industrial city in the Soviet Union. Now, it's the middle of winter. I'm talking about the kind of cold that makes your nose hairs freeze. What are you doing? Probably staying inside, right? Drinking something hot. Not this group. Meet the Dyatlov group. 9 students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. They weren't just book smart, they were tough. These were experienced hikers, the kind who thought a fun weekend involved a backpack, skis, and a few 100 kilometers of frozen wilderness. Their leader was a 23-year-old named Igor Dyatlov. By all accounts, he was the guy you'd want leading you into the middle of nowhere. Competent, serious, respected. Then there was Zina Kolmogorova, or Zina. She kept a diary on the trip, the kind with little observations and feelings. There was Yuri Doroshenko, always smiling. Ludmila Dubanina, the medic of the group, smart and capable. Semyon Zolotarov, the older, even more experienced trekker who joined last minute. And the others, Yuri Krivonishenko, Rustem Slobodin, Alexander Kolovatov, and Nikolai Thibault-Brignol. Just normal people. Well, normal for people who volunteer to hike the Category 3 route in the northern Urals in January, the hardest grade there was. Their goal was a mountain called Ortorten. Their journey would be over 300 kilometers long on skis, pulling sleds. Look at their photos. That's them just before they left. See the smiles, the confidence. They look like any group of university friends bundled up, ready for an adventure. Yuri has his camera. Igor's checking a list. They're not scared. They're excited. They've done this before. Think about your own friend group. There's the planner, the cheerful one, the responsible one, the one who brings the extra snacks. This was that, a fellowship. They trained for this. They had the right gear. Thick tents, warm, for the time, reindeer skin coats, proper boots. They weren't naive kids wandering into a blizzard. They were the A-team of student hikers. And their plan was, frankly, hardcore. Train to the last tiny village Wijai, then into the silent white expanse of the northern Urals for weeks. They'd send a telegram when they reached their next big checkpoint. That was the plan. On January 23rd, 1959, they boarded a train. They said their goodbyes. They waved. They were laughing, full of that buzzing energy you get before a big trip. They sent a final, cheerful postcard from the last village. It read, in that classic way friends do, "Wish us luck." And with that, they skied away from the known world into the vast, beautiful, and utterly empty winter of the mountains. They were looking for adventure, for challenge, for the quiet only a frozen wilderness can give you. They had no idea, of course, that their story would become one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries, that in a few weeks their names would be whispered not just in sadness, but in utter confusion, that people would be arguing about what happened to them for the next 60 years. But for now, in this chapter of the story, they're just 9 friends. The cold is just weather. The mountain is just a destination. And the only thing on their minds is the path ahead. So picture them, the crunch of skis on fresh snow, the puffs of breath in the icy air, the quiet jokes lost to the wind, a little dot of human warmth and noise moving into a landscape so big and so quiet it doesn't even notice them. Imagine their world for a moment. It's not just cold. It's a world reduced to basics. The crunch of your skis, the burn in your thighs going up a slope, the glorious silent glide going down, the smell of pine and frost. Your whole universe is the person in front of you, the sled you're pulling, and the endless, beautiful, exhausting white. They made their way from Vizai, the last village, into the true wilderness. They were following a route that was more of a suggestion on a map than a trail. There were no signs, no ranger stations, just them, their compasses, and the land. Now, here's a thing about trips like this. Especially in 1959, you couldn't just send a text. Your lifeline was a schedule. You'd tell people back home, we should reach this point by this date. If we're late by more than a few days, maybe send a search party. It was a system built on trust and toughness. The Dyatlov group's plan had a key checkpoint, a small settlement used by geologists called, very creatively, North 2. Their plan was to reach it, restock a tiny bit, and most importantly, send a telegram home to Sverdlovsk. A simple, "We're here, all is well" message. That telegram was due around February 12th. Back home, friends and family marked the calendar. February 12th came, no telegram. No big deal. These things happen. Weather slows you down. A route might be trickier than expected. You give it a few days, you make another cup of tea, and try not to stare at the silent telephone. February 13th, 14th, 15th. The silence from the mountains got a little heavier, a little colder. But here's where we have to understand the mentality. These weren't tourists. They were some of the most capable young hikers in the region. Everyone figured they'd just been delayed. They'd come skiing out of the trees any day now, with a great story about a storm they'd weathered. Worry was there, sure, but it was a quiet, background worry. Meanwhile, let's rewind a little. We have one last precious look into their trip before the silence. Remember Zena, the diarist? She wrote in her journal, and the entries were found later. They're totally normal. That's what's so haunting about them. She writes about the cold, of course, about being tired. She writes about silly arguments. Someone ate more than their share of rations, the usual group trip drama. She notes the beautiful views. On January 31st, from that last village, Vizai, the group sent that final postcard. We have the text. It's cheerful, breezy, the kind of thing you dash off without a second thought. We are now setting out on our hike. The weather here is fine. Wish us luck in reaching Otorton. That's it. Wish us luck. Not help us. Not we're scared. Just a standard, upbeat sign-off. After that, nothing. The mountains swallowed the sound of their skis, their voices, their laughter. The diary entries stop. The line between their world and the world back home just goes quiet. So by the time February 20th rolls around, the quiet worry in Sverdlovsk has grown into a loud, ringing alarm. This wasn't a delay anymore. This was something else. The families went to the Institute. The Institute went to the authorities. A decision was made. It was time to go look for them. The first search party was made of their peers, fellow students, friends. These were volunteers, people who loved the mountains too, now heading into them with a very different feeling. It wasn't excitement, it was dread. They took trucks, then skis, retracing the planned route, calling out names into the vast, indifferent forest. The weather, of course, didn't help. Snow, wind, more snow. Searching for a small, colored tent and thousands of square miles of white is like looking for a specific grain of sand on a beach. It felt hopeless. They pressed on towards that checkpoint, North 2. Maybe the group was holed up there, waiting out a storm. But when the searchers got there, nothing. No sign. Just empty buildings and more silence. The worry now was a cold stone in everyone's stomach. The group had vanished, somewhere between Vizai and North 2, a huge, empty, brutal stretch of land. It was at this point that the military got involved. This was the Soviet Union, remember. Things could get organized or complicated very quickly. Army planes joined the search, flying low over the passes, looking for any sign of life or a campsite. It was from the air, finally, that they saw something. On February 26th, nearly a month after the group's last cheerful postcard, a pilot spotted something strange on the slope of a mountain called Kholat Syakhl. The name from the local Mansi language translates to Dead Mountain. Not the most comforting name, is it? From the air, they saw an area of disturbed snow and what looked like the ruins of a tent. The searchers on the ground were given the coordinates. They changed course, skiing with a new grim urgency towards the slope of Dead Mountain. They didn't know what they'd find. An abandoned camp? Survivors? The worst? As they got closer, they could make it out. A mound in the snow. The shape of a tent, but wrong. It was completely buried, collapsed, and it was eerily still. The leader of the search team, a man named Mikhail Sharavin, reached it first. He brushed away the snow from the fabric, and he saw something that made no sense. The tent wasn't collapsed from snow weight. It was cut open, and not from the outside, as if an animal or someone else had attacked. It was cut from the inside. He peered inside. The scene was chaotic, but in a very specific way. Backpacks, boots, coats, ski pants, all left behind. A diary lay open, a camera, a kettle, ready to be boiled. It was as if everyone was sitting there, getting ready for bed, and then in one single, simultaneous moment of panic, they had ripped their way out and run, barely dressed, into the minus 30 degrees C night. Why? What makes 9 sensible, experienced, freezing cold people do that? The search party stood there on the silent mountainside, staring at that cut-open tent flap fluttering in the wind. They knew right then that whatever story they were about to uncover, it wasn't a simple one. This was the first page of a mystery. And from the tent, leading down the slope towards a dark line of trees about a mile away, was a trail of footprints in the snow. Some were in socks, some were barefoot. All of them were running. So, we're standing with the search party on the slope of Dead Mountain. The wind's biting. Before them, a slashed tent, whispering a story of panic. And leading away from it, down into a tree line about a mile away, a trail. This wasn't a walking trail. This was a running, stumbling, desperate trail. The searchers, their own hearts pounding now, followed it. The footprints told a frantic story. Some were from boots, but many were just from socks. A few were even from bare feet, pressed into the freezing snow. Imagine that for a second. The sheer, overriding terror you must feel to run out into a Siberian winter night without your boots. The trail led down the steep slope, away from the relative shelter of the tent, toward a dense cluster of Siberian pines at the forest's edge. And there, beneath one particularly large old cedar tree, the story took its first tragic and confusing turn. Under the branches of that cedar tree, the search party found the remains of a small fire. It had been built hastily, you could tell, a few charred twigs and branches, and near it they found the first 2 hikers. It was Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko, the guy who was always smiling in the photos. They were underdressed, let's be clear. They were dressed for bed, not for a minus 30 degrees Celsius night. They were in their long underwear, socks, no coats, no boots. They had clearly tried to get a fire going here, using whatever they could snap off the trees. And this is where the details get specific and strange. The men were found close to the cedar's trunk, but when the searchers looked up, they saw something odd. High up on the tree, about 5 meters up, that's over 15 feet, branches were snapped off, freshly, not broken by wind or old age. It looked like someone or something had climbed high into that frozen tree in the pitch dark and torn branches off. Why? The best guess is they were trying to get wood for the fire, or maybe to see something or signal. But 5 meters up, in the dark, barefoot? The mind struggles to picture it. The official cause of death for these two was simple and sad: hypothermia. They'd frozen to death by their pathetic little fire. A tragic but understandable end if you're stranded in the cold. It fit the picture of a group that fled their tent and, overcome by the cold, succumbed one by one. For a moment, the searchers might have thought that was the awful, simple answer. A panic, a flake, a tragic freeze, a mountain accident. But then they looked around, and they counted. 2 bodies here, 7 people still missing to the snow. And the footprints in the snow told a more complicated story. The trail didn't end at the cedar tree. It kept going, fainter now, deeper into the dark, thick woods. Some of the group had left these 2 by the fire and kept moving. Why leave the relative shelter of the tree and a fire? Where were they going? The search intensified now, heavy with dread. The teams fanned out into the woods beyond the cedar. The snow was deeper here, drifted into soft, swallowing mounds. Days passed. March arrived, but winter held the Urals in a tight, frozen fist. It wasn't until March 3rd that they found the next body, Rustem Slobodin. He was about 300 meters farther into the woods, toward the tent, as if he had tried to go back. Then, a few days later, Igor Dyatlov himself, the leader, and then Zina, the diarist. They were found separately, at intervals, over a slope leading back toward the mountain. These 3, like the 2 Yuris under the tree, died of the cold. They were a little better dressed. Some had a boot or a coat awkwardly on, but not enough. Their positions suggested a slow, grim, and lonely end. They were trying to crawl, to walk, to get back to the tent they'd fled in terror. They didn't make it. 5 found, 4 still lost to the snow. At this point, the search was becoming a recovery operation. The weather was still brutal. Spring thaw was weeks away. The remaining 4, Ludmila, Semyon, Alexander, and Nikolai, were buried under meters of snow in a deep ravine, a creek bed, not far from the cedar tree. They weren't found until May 4th, when the snow finally began to melt. The last of the winter's grip loosened, and the mountain gave up its final secrets. And what it revealed made no sense, because these 4 weren't like the others. They were different. They were better dressed, for one. They had pieces of clothing from the ones who died first,
a swap made in a desperate bid for warmth. But that's not what the investigators stop and stare at. It was their injuries. Nikolai had a fractured skull, a serious one, but there was no big, obvious wound on the outside of his head. It was like the force came from within. Ludmila and Semyon had the most horrific injuries, massive, crushing damage to their chests. Their ribs were shattered, driven inward. Semyon's heart was literally mushed. The medical examiner said the force was comparable to being hit by a car at high speed. But, and this is the biggest, most glaring but, there was no external bruising. No cuts, no scrapes, no marks on their skin. It was as if some immense, invisible pressure had just squeezed them from the inside out. To add another layer of pure weirdness to the scene, some of their clothes, Ludmila's sweater, a pair of wool trousers, showed traces of radiation. Let's just pause here. Under the quiet, polite language of official reports, this is the moment the mystery goes from a tragic accident to a full-blown, head-scratching, what on earth happened enigma. 5 people die of cold. Okay, that's the mountain being cruel. But 4 others have injuries that look like they were in an industrial press accident with no external marks, and their clothes are radioactive in the middle of nowhere? The tent was cut from the inside. They fled without shoes. Some tried to climb a tree. Some had chests crushed by an invisible force. And there's radiation. Every possible simple explanation just ran into a brick wall. Avalanche? No avalanche signs. And why cut the tent? Animal attack? No tracks, no bites. A fight amongst themselves? 9 skilled friends turn into bone-crushing superheroes in their underwear? It doesn't fit. The search was over. All 9 were found, but the real search, the search for an answer, was just beginning. And it would plunge us into a world of theories, from the painfully logical to the wildly outlandish. So, we're left with a scene that refuses to add up. 9 experienced hikers are dead. 5 froze. 4 had injuries that belong in a factory accident, not on a snowy mountain pass. And the only witnesses are the sighing pines and the relentless wind. It's now May 1959. The last body has been found. The evidence, the tent, the diaries, the clothes, the photos from Yuri's camera is all packed up and sent to Sverdlovsk. A team of investigators, doctors, and military experts sits down in a room, looks at all this, and collectively scratches their heads. Their job? Write a report. Make it make sense. The official in charge, a prosecutor named Lev Ivanov, had a problem. In the Soviet Union, mysteries were inconvenient, especially ones involving top students dying in bizarre ways. The system liked answers, clear ones. So, after a few months, the investigation was closed. The official cause? A vague catch-all phrase. The hikers died due to a compelling natural force, which, if you think about it, is just a fancy way of saying something really big and scary happened and we don't know what it was. Case closed, file sealed, move along. But you can't just seal away a puzzle this good. The families needed more. The friends needed more. And honestly, human curiosity needed more. So, over the decades, the Dyatlov Pass became a detective story for the world, with amateur sleuths and experts alike pitching their ideas. Let's walk through the main ones, from the most logical to well, you'll see.
We've walked with the hikers. We've stood by the torn tent. We've sifted through the theories. But a story like this doesn't end when the case file is closed. It grows. It changes. It becomes something bigger than the facts. It becomes a legend. So, this is our final chapter. Not about what happened, but about what happened after. About the echo of that night on Dead Mountain and how it rippled out to touch art, science, and the imagination of anyone who hears it. First, there's the simple human legacy. In a park in Yekaterinburg, the city once called Sverdlovsk, there stands a simple, solemn monument. It's a stone arch, and beneath it, etched in metal, are the faces of all 9. A place for families, friends, and now pilgrims of mystery to remember that these were real people, not just characters in a ghost story. Then there's the scientific legacy. Dyatlov Pass became a benchmark for mystery. It's a true crime puzzle for forensic specialists, geologists, and physicists. Every few years, a new study emerges. We talked about the 2021 Avalanche simulation. There have been studies on hypothermia behavior, like paradoxical undressing, on low-frequency sound, on wind patterns. The pass is like a laboratory for disaster scientists, a cold case that challenges each new generation with its bizarre clues. But perhaps the most fascinating legacy is in our culture. The Dyatlov Pass incident has seeped into books, documentaries, podcasts like this one, and even blockbuster entertainment. It inspired an eerie segment in the video game Death Stranding. It's been the subject of major Hollywood films and Russian dramas. Why? Because it's the perfect template for a mystery. Ordinary people, an isolated setting, and clues that point in a dozen impossible directions. It's a story you can project your own fears onto, be they of nature, the unknown, or the government. There's also the annual track. Yes, to this day, adventurous and some would say morbid hikers make the journey to the pass. They stand where the tent was, they look at that cedar tree, they try to feel what happened. Some leave memorial tokens. Others are hoping in some way to solve it by standing in the very spot. Most come away with more questions and a deep respect for the power of that place. Which brings us to the final and maybe most important point. After all the speculation about Yetis and weapons tests, what lingers isn't the what, but the why, and more specifically, the moment. Let's zoom in on that moment one last time. It's around 9 p.m. on February 1st, 1959. Inside the tent, it's cold but manageable. The group is in their sleeping bags, maybe chatting, writing diaries. Yuri's camera is put away. The kerosene stove is off. Outside, it's pitch black, silent, and lethally cold. Then, something happens. Not a slow thing, a sudden thing. A thing that causes immediate, unanimous, and catastrophic panic. Within less than a minute, They go from resting to using knives to slash their only shelter open to escape into a negative 30 degrees Celsius night. They choose certain slower death by freezing over remaining where they are. What did they see? What did they hear? Was it a sound so enormous it felt like the sky was tearing? A vibration that shook their very bones? A light so blinding and strange it short-circuited all rational thought? Or was it simply the wrong shape of a snowdrift, the groan of the wind misinterpreted by tired minds as an avalanche triggering a chain reaction of fear? We will never know that moment. That is the heart of the lock, and perhaps that's okay. Sometimes in our desire for clean answers, we miss the point of a good mystery. The Dyatlov Pass isn't a problem to be solved. It's a story to be contemplated. It's a reminder that nature, in all its raw power, doesn't always play by rules we understand. It's a lesson in how thin the line is between a fun adventure and a fight for survival. And it's a testament to the fact that even in our modern, explained world, some shadows in the corner remain stubbornly dark. So, as we end our time with this story, let's not just think of the strange injuries or the radiation. Let's picture the 9 friends at the beginning, full of excitement on that train platform. Let's remember their skill, their camaraderie, and the terrible, bewildering bad luck that found them on a mountain whose name they likely didn't know meant dead. Take that with you, not just the chill of the mystery, but the warmth of the people at its center. And maybe, just maybe, let it make you look at your own adventures, big or small, with a little more wonder and a little more preparedness. After all, the world is beautiful, but it's also wild. And the best bedtime stories remind us of both.
Thank you for journeying through the Dyatlov Pass with me. We've reached the end of this particular story, from the hopeful beginning to the enduring mystery. There are no more chapters to add without venturing into pure speculation or repetition. However, this is just the beginning for your channel. The Dyatlov Pass template, an atmospheric, unresolved historical mystery told with calm narration, is a perfect model. There are countless other stories that fit this same compelling mold. Here are a few powerful ideas for your next video, each with that same blend of human drama and eerie mystery. 1. The disappearance of the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers. 3 lighthouse keepers in a remote Scottish outpost vanish without a trace in 1900, leaving a stopped clock, an untouched meal, and a single chair knocked over. The logbook entries before their disappearance are deeply unsettling. It's a tighter, smaller scale mystery than Dyatlov, but just as atmospheric. 2. The silent city of Cahokia.
Who built the massive, sophisticated pre-Columbian city in North America near modern-day St. Louis, and why did they completely abandon it centuries before European contact? It's a mystery of scale and silence, perfect for speculative storytelling. 3. The Tomam Shud case. In 1948, a well-dressed man is found dead on an Australian beach with no ID. A tiny scrap of paper hidden in his clothes reads Tomam Shud, Persian for ended. This leads to a mysterious book, a secret code, and a woman who may have known him but denies it. It's a Cold War-era enigma with a haunting, personal element. Would you like me to draft a detailed, chapter-by-chapter outline for one of these, just like we did for Dyatlov Pass? I'm ready when you are. Just say the word. Otherwise, keep telling great stories. The night is full of them.